adopted the notion of an MBA program that I could throw myself 100% behind. I didn't have to do any kind of sales job other than simply getting hired. So that is my quick introduction of Lisa and her original role, key role in this program. Lisa has been out traveling the world and has actually not been with us for the past couple of years. So this is, Lisa was telling me that this is her first opportunity to see the program up and running. Anyway, I would like to welcome Lisa Lorimer.
It's great to be here, thanks. All right, great, thanks. It's great to be here. It is really fun for me to see the program up and running. This was lots of conversations and lots of small groups for about 18 months. I actually traded an office here in the building for my help in trying to think about what this MBA program might look like. I just want to tell you a little bit about my company. Usually in an intro you'll hear a bit, so just to put what I have to say into a little bit of perspective. I was the CEO of the Vermont Bread Company here in Brattleboro, and if you ever want to do a tour, it's a really fun tour to go through and see. It's like a Willy Wonka factory making bread. We started, it's a typical Vermont story. We started on a dirt road in a basement of a man's house, and then moved to the spacious 800-square-foot barn, also on that same dirt road in Guilford. And I actually joined the company at about that time. And now we're a national company under the brand names Vermont Bread, Rudy's Organic, Matthew's All Natural, and we do private label for Whole Foods and Trader Joe's. And so that's who we are. So I'm on a book tour. So what I thought I would do is start out here with a bit of a piece that I do for the book tour. And then what I really want to do is try to open this up for conversation so that I can talk to you about what it is you really want to know, or what kind of conversations you want to get into. But I would like to talk a little bit about the book. And the bookseller, our local bookstore, will be here right around 7 o'clock to have books for me to sign for you if you're interested. I had the most amazing fortune to meet Margo Fraser about 10 years ago. Margo just turned 81 years old. She's the founder of Birkenstock USA. And I met her years ago at a women's entrepreneur conference in British Columbia. And I was so impressed with her that she was so willing to talk so honestly about what it's really like to run a company. And we actually traveled around a bit over the last 10 years, going to these types of conferences and telling our stories, like telling funny and sad and real stories about what it's like to run a business. And we ended up having entrepreneurs line up for an hour or two to come up and say to us, I didn't realize that it's the same in my little company as it is in Birkenstock USA and the Vermont Bread Company. So we were approached by the publisher Brattleboro Publishing to write a book about the kind of things that we were telling stories about. So I had a great chance to do that with Margo over the last 18 months or so. And I actually was in a house, a very drafty house on the shoreline of Maine, in Pine Point, Maine, where there are two warm places in the house, right in front of the gas stove and right in front of the fireplace. And if you moved from those, you were freezing. So I was there, and Margo was in San Rafael, California, which is just outside of San Francisco. And so we worked together in this very inward process to write this book, because we really wanted to push ourselves to tell the truth about what it's really like. And so we went through this whole inward process together, working with a really terrific editor who's based here in Brattleboro. And so when we were done, it's become now this very outward process. And so it's kind of a bizarre thing when you write a book to then the next part of it is that you travel around and talk about it. And so that's been a really interesting process for me. And I want to tell you a story, actually, about some feedback I got about the book. And it's from this woman, Sue Strassenberg. She's about 5'5", red hair, sparkly blue eyes, just really energetic. Some people call her Sweet Sue. But that's only if you've never met her across the tennis court or competed with her in her business. She started her business about 15 years ago with her sister. And it's called Peerless Painting and Wall Covering, based in Portland, Maine. And they started it with 2 paintbrushes and a sanding bar. And she's grown it to become the largest woman-owned business of this type in northern New England. And she does a lot of commercial work. She does ski areas and schools and hospitals and hotels and office buildings. because she's from Maine, she was chosen by the Bush administration to paint their inaugural ballroom, including what she says, the flaky shit on the ceiling. And so that led to a really cool marketing campaign for her, which was from ballrooms to bathrooms, because she also does a lot of residential work. Now, when I was in Maine, not this past winter, the winter before, is when everything hit the skids in the financial market. And so all of a sudden, the economy tanked, and everything stopped. And construction stopped, as you can imagine. Certainly in the Portland, Maine area, everything stopped. At one point, every bedroom in northern New England was empty. And so here is Sue, who's grown her business every year. She's done these great things, pays livable wages, doing this great stuff. And all of a sudden, everything that she knew, how it worked in her company, didn't work anymore. And we actually, Margo and I talk about this in the book, and we say it's, we refer to this as the trend is your friend until it's not. And it happens in most businesses. And here was Sue in this place where, if you've ever been there, it is the most agitating, scary place to be in. And it's almost like you can't even formulate the question, can you help me? When you're in that kind of place where nothing's working anymore, you got all these people, got to meet payroll. How the heck do you make this happen? And so her sister had been hearing me travel around a bit over the last few years, talking about one of our key points of practical wisdom in the book. The thing that helped me the most was to create an advisory board for your business. And so her sister talked Sue into trying this. And she was so brave. I mean, it's such a place of angst. And to think about, okay, here I am in the most scary point in my business, and I'm going to invite these other business people to talk to me about it. I mean, that's a really scary thing. So she's on the board of her country club, and we met in a room at her country club. And I remember her walking into this room with her financials in her hand, and she was so nervous because the only person you tend to show your financials to is your accountant, right? When you're accounting people. And here she was bringing it for all of us to see what was going on. And I show up like I always do with a well-chewed pencil and note paper and lots of questions and lots of stories. And so I start to tell her some stories about, in the early days of Vermont Bread Company, we had this distributor in the Boston market who was great. He grew every year. He took boatloads of product. He called on all the supermarkets. He did all the billing, and it was great. And we were fat and happy until we weren't. And he got involved with some shady people. He put all his assets into some shell company, started kiting checks. And by the time the dust settled, he owed us $195,000 at a time when my little company had a $50,000 line of credit. So I tell her these kind of stories, and I tell her, most recently a story about we introduced this cool new product line, and we're selling great guns with it. So the sales are going like this, and the profits are going like this in exactly the same direction, the opposite direction, because we failed to do good activity-based costing. So the more we sold of this product, the less money that we made. So I tell her these kind of stories, and I see her start to relax. And then as we get into it more, I start asking some really basic questions about her company, about how it's working, about what are some of the things we could do, just basic and stupid questions, and I see her relax more. And so we were finally able to work together, and I did this while I was also writing this book. Now, unbeknownst to her, she was working with me, because when you're writing a book and you get stuck and you don't know how the heck you're going to say something, I got really good advice, which was to sit at my kitchen table and pretend that I was explaining this to Sue. So that's what I did. So the whole time I'm writing my book, as you look through it, whenever I'm writing my intros or my story or the things that we learned, I'm telling it to Sue. So we come out of this self-reflective time, Margo and I, and we go out into the world because our book is being published. And we get some advanced copies. So I give one to Sue, because I want to know, she doesn't know this, but I want to know what she thinks of this book I wrote to her. And so I give it to her. She's a great reader. She reads all the time. And days go by. A weekend goes by. I'm like, she hates my book. This woman hates my book and doesn't know how to tell me. So the phone rings, and it's Sue. And so she says, I just had the worst day in the history of my company. I had a trifecta of a bad day. She said, in the morning, one of my employees had a heart attack. And when something like that happens, it's intense. You're dealing with the employee and the medical and the family and trying to get that all set and then covering the work. So she dealt with that in the morning. Before lunch, one of her largest customers called and said, one of your employees is stealing from me. So to go deal with that. And then at the end of the day, she was waiting for this check from a big customer to come in to pay her payroll, which was due that day, and the check didn't come in. And then she paused, and she said, thank God I read that book. Because what she said is that in the midst of this really bad day, she remembered Gary Hirschberg telling the story, Gary from Stonyfield Yogurt, tells the story in the book about when Stonyfield Yogurt was much smaller. He had his yogurt produced at a dairy. He wasn't producing, it was being done at a dairy. And the dairy got foreclosed on and closed. So he has all these big customers and no way to make his yogurt. So he's out on a tennis court at 10 o'clock at night, sobbing because he doesn't know what he's going to do to keep his company going. So she remembered that. She remembered also the story that Carol Barry tells in the book, the most heartbreaking, tragic story of when an employee was killed in her plant. And she said, I also remembered all of you telling your stories about cash. You know, I tell all kinds of crazy stories about running out of cash. And then she stopped and she said, Lisa, I have to say, though, my favorite was when you talked about that employee, the one who is like really difficult to deal with. They come in late when they shouldn't. They leave early. They have a really bad attitude. People don't want to be around them. You talked about that employee, and that employee was you. And she said, I remembered how you talked about that. And I think that what she was doing, as she was remembering this stuff, I think it was not from a place of misery loves company. Although I guess, you know, if you're miserable, it is kind of nice to have a little company. But I think she was more saying that it's very hard to find a reflection, a real reflection of what it's like to run a business when you go out and look at the business books. You know, there's so many sort of superhero stories of the entrepreneur who leapt over small buildings and, you know, and never had any problems. And it's that superhero story that gets in our way. Or as we say in the book, we call this the fairy tale. You know how the fairy tale goes, right? Once upon a time, a long, long time ago, in a tiny kingdom called Vermont, a girl child was born, fully formed, business owner queen. She knew everything there was to know about business from the time that she was born. As a matter of fact, her first word was credit, and her second word was debit. She started her first business when she was 4, sold that, moved on to her next one that paid for all her lunches in high school. And then when she was 21 years old, she got involved with the company that became her life's work. That was her big idea. And while she was running that company, everybody, absolutely everybody loved her. Her customers loved her so much, they said, you know, any kind of shelf space that you need, we'll give it to you. And, oh yeah, we'll pay you our bills in cash. Her employees loved her, came to work on time every day, never complained, always thanked each other about how great they were to all work together. Her distributors loved her. Her suppliers told her that they will ship anything to her without short shipping it and pay, and you can take as long as you need to pay your bills. And her bank in particular loved her. They made sure that at the end of every week when she needed to meet payroll, that there was enough money in that account, and if there wasn't, they would put some in. And for our values-based businesses, of course, every decision was easy because every single value always balanced out every single time. And most importantly, the fire and passion and love for her business always burned within her heart. Our business owner queen was appointed to the White House Conference on Small Business, met President Clinton and Vice President Gore. And when she told her grandmother about that, the grandmother said, That's nice, dear. When are you going to graduate from college? So when in her 30s, our business owner queen went back to school as an adult and got her bachelor's degree. And then one day, when she was 44 years old, she decided that day, and the next day, brought in her equity partner so that everybody, all of the stakeholders everywhere, made lots and lots and lots of money. And she wrote a book with her hero, Margo Fraser. She's here at Marlboro Graduate School talking to you. So we can laugh about that, but you know, it's just so universal. I attended a program at Harvard Business School it's called the Owner-President Management Program, and it's for owner-presidents of $10 million to $100 million companies, and the students come from all over the world. And on the second day that we were in class, our professor stopped and he kind of looked up at the room and he smiled and he said, "So, are you done being intimidated by everyone else in the room?" And we all kind of laughed a little bit, and then it got silent. And then we all burst into laughter because it suddenly dawned on us that they were as intimidated by me as I was by them, that we were all telling this kind of fairy tale. And you know, even though I joke about the fairy tale, for Margo and I, when we were writing this book together, we pushed ourselves to tell the truth as much as we could. You know, we would just push back at each other and say, you know, is there more that we need to say about this? And I found in myself that one of the chapters is about cash. And I realized after I had written my part of this chapter about cash that I realized I'd been very flippant. You know, I can talk in very funny ways about running out of cash. I can say things like, I never had a positive number in my checkbook. That's true. The last time I ran out of cash was 2 weeks before I sold the majority of my company. That's true too. But it's kind of flippant the way I was talking about it. And one of our contributors, Marie Wilson, the president of the White House Project, talked very honestly about cash. And I realized that I was participating sort of in this fairy tale too by not telling my truth about that. And so I just want to read one section about cash from the book that I had to rewrite. About 5 years ago, before I sold the majority of my company, I attended an executive education program at Harvard Business School. On the final day, my accounting professor told us that after all the time we'd spent in class and all the tuition that we had paid, we really needed to know only one thing. He said it was the most important piece of information we could take with us. He held up a large sign written in black magic marker that said, "Cash is king." We all laughed. A simple sign that made us laugh, and yet the idea is not so simple to deal with when we're in the midst of running a business. I believe that perhaps the most valuable business practice is owning your numbers. Nowadays, I give talks to business groups and I do one-on-one consulting about how important it is to understand your numbers. I tell business owners they can use their numbers to inform their decisions about what is most important and what to do next. I say that with a little practice, a calculator, and someone they can sit down with who will ask questions and help them find answers, all entrepreneurs can learn their numbers. These things are true, and they help a lot. But there were times when I knew what the numbers meant, how to interpret them, how to impact them. And yet, despite that knowledge, I didn't have the courage to look at them. I could not stand seeing the negative balance growing in the checkbook, and I would leave my newly printed financial statements from the previous month unopened in my inbox for days. Every time I walked past the statements, my heart would beat faster and my stomach would hurt. I tried to tell myself that in order to stay in my bubble, in order to call customers, stay upbeat, and remain positive for the rest of my staff, I needed to ignore my financial problems. But that was never a long-term solution. In order to move my company forward, I always had to turn around and face those numbers. In dealing with cash, I sometimes found it difficult to match my values with my actions. When cash was tight or non-existent, it made sense for me not to take a paycheck and to put my personal expenses on credit cards whose balances kept increasing. We all know that's what you do when you run a company. But when I tell that side of the story, it's the hero's story. I made a personal sacrifice to make it all work, and isn't that just grand? The truth is, when there wasn't enough cash, my story wasn't pretty. When cash was particularly tight, I printed checks on a Friday. I held them till the following week or the week after that. I ducked phone calls from my suppliers while continuing to place orders, and then sent out checks only to the ones who yelled the loudest or threatened to cut us off. The stress of running out of cash was compounded because our core company values of respect, tell the truth, keep your word, were all violated as I juggled everything to keep the company running. Running a values-driven business is about trying to keep track of the multiple bottom lines and knowing that one part of the equation sometimes takes precedence. It doesn't mean that we're all perfect all the time or even perfectly aligned with all of our values. And so for me to go back and tell that truth, that's the story that we don't hear about what happens when there's that value disconnect inside of your head. Now, I do want to caution and say, when Margo and I are doing this, we're not advocating putting truth serum in your morning coffee. Because there are, a big piece of leadership is holding that vision and moving everyone and all of your company towards that vision. And you need to be able to do that to attract investors and employees and customers. So we're not saying that we're advocating telling the truth everywhere, but we are saying it's really important to find a place to tell the truth somewhere. And in this case, we talk a lot about building that advisory board. And then I just want to give you the rest of the story about Sue, and then we can open this up for some conversation. So the rest of the story is that at the end of this fiscal year, Peerless Painting and Wall Covering finished the year with the highest revenue and the highest profitability in the history of their company. So I'm not promising those kind of results, but I can promise that kind of relief, the relief that she felt in finding a place where she can talk about these issues. So thanks. Yeah, there's some really great pages in here, and I actually have a handout which I can send that to you too. I have a handout of just that part of the book, and it's pretty thorough. It's the things that I did after I got mine going, and the diversity piece. Like try and really think about people who think differently than you, who are different than you, who run different sized companies. I had people who ran smaller companies than mine, but who had a great eye for operations, and so I'd put them on the board. And then I would look for companies that were larger than mine, so they could help me get through whatever this next phase is. So the pages in there are great, and I'm happy to send a handout about that. Yeah, and you'd be surprised how many of us say yes to other entrepreneurs to do this kind of thing, because we know how important it was for us.
Thank you.
John?
How much was how much support did you get from SVN?
That's actually where I got a number of my advisory board people from. What happened is that I owned this company for many years. There were 3 partners. And my main partner left. He is someone I never saw outside of work. We would just come to work every day for 13 years and have a conversation and move the company forward. And so I never needed any outside help because I had him. But when we moved into our plant, we're now a bread factory up on Cotton Mill Hill. We produce 4,000 pounds an hour. When we did that, we were less entrepreneurial, and he just really liked the smaller business stuff. And so he moved to Portland, Maine. But he forgot 2 things, which is I'm a salesperson, so I could talk him into anything, and he's a pilot. And so I could talk him into flying back from Portland, Maine to help me run my company. So he said he picked the wrong Portland, so he moved to Portland, Oregon. So when that happened, I suddenly had this huge hole in my life. Like my business partner was gone. And I started to go out and find other places to talk. So I went to the chamber here. I went to Women Business Owners Network. I went to Rotary, but I never quite got that. And then I went to the Social Venture Network and the Vermont Businesses for Social Responsibility, which is where I started to meet people who could help me, could help fill this gap that was in my business life. And you got to pick people who are strong enough to stand up to you. That's the thing about entrepreneurs. We can be a bit of a steamroller. And so you really got to find people who are strong enough. And the other piece about this is that once you have them, you don't have to keep them. There's no rule that you're like married to them for the rest of your business life, because what happened for us is that we had a great board, and we got to this, I think we got to like, I think the cliff that happens is right around 8 million in sales. And so in most businesses, once you get there, everything changes. And I was getting there, and everything was falling. It's like you suddenly have big holes where communication used to work, doesn't work anymore. And so once you get to that place, you need a different orientation. The entrepreneur actually has to let go in a whole big way that's hard to do. And so I knew that we were there, and my board knew that we were there. And so I took them out for a great dinner at the Putney Inn and toasted all the good work that we'd done, and I fired them. At the end of the toast, they're like, are we fired? But that's the thing to keep in mind, is that this is to help you. This is to help the CEO. And so make sure that you remember that going forward, and just find people that get that and that you can talk to and tell the truth. I mean, this is the place where I would cry, or I would scream, or I would, whatever. Bring my really biggest, gnarliest problems to them. And so you want to make sure that that's a room full of people that are helping you to be the best leader that you can be. Yes?
Hi, Lisa. My name is Tess. I am a student here, and I live in New York, and I'm a marketing. I'm in marketing for a renewable energy company.
For an energy company?
Renewable energy.
Oh, great.
I'm curious about the relationship between the business and the board, and if there's compensation or how that.
Yeah, that's also addressed in the book. Not that I'm trying to sell the book. I will give you this for free. It's addressed in there. It's not a board of directors. You may or may not have a board of directors. We did. This is separate. This is basically a place for the CEO to become the best leader that she can be. And so I did pay them, and I recommend paying them. It keeps you accountable and them accountable. In the beginning, I paid them $100 a meeting. I was paying them a lot more at the end, but when I was just getting started, or when we were much smaller. So you do what you can do, but I recommend paying. And then I also have some ideas in there about structure that worked in terms of, you want them on site so they understand your business and what's happening there, but you need them off site too so you don't get interrupted. And so I have, a lot of those basic issues are covered in that part of the book.
Thanks.
Yes, Mary.
Yes, I'm Mary. I'm on staff here. And I think you're incredibly courageous how much you've opened up your story. And the piece of the story I'm curious about is, what would you say are the 2 or 3, you don't have to limit yourself, but you can, attributes that you think really contributed to your success?
Oh, interesting. I just never stopped. That's part of how I got so burnt out, right? Well, if you think about it, too, my business kind of did it for me. If you think about what we do, it's insane, right? We have to make our bread, English rolls, muffins, which we do up the street here. And it's a natural bread, so there's no preservatives in it. It's organic breads. There's nothing else in it. So we have to bake that bread and get it into every single supermarket and natural product store that we service from this plant, the Northeast, between the hours of 5 and 10 in the morning every day. It's crazy. There's no, it's insane. Now that I've learned about other business models, I think, why did I ever do this? So what happens, though, is that it adds a level of urgency to your company. And so you just sort of get into that energy. I'm sort of shocked, actually, when I work with some other companies that don't have this sense of urgency that the bakery teaches you to do, because there is no sale tomorrow. If you don't sell today, there's no sale. And so you can go back in tomorrow. Maybe you still have your shelf space. So there's a sense of urgency in that. And I sort of just, that's what I sort of grew up in. From the time I was 21 until I was 44, that's what I did. And so there was no stopping there. I think also I was really willing to ask for help, both from my original business partner, who was older than I was, and he taught me. We were talking this morning on the radio about women-owned businesses, and I have to say that I learned everything I know about money and risk and business from the men in my life. And so I had an incredible mentor, and that was very helpful. And as I was selling my bread for the first time, I showed up. I just cringe when I think about some of the things I did without knowing what I was doing. I showed up in Boston. This guy had come on vacation to Brattleboro, and we were selling our bread at the Co-op and Lama Toucan and Crow. That was our business. And this guy comes on vacation and says, oh, I want to put your bread into 3 of our Stop and Shop stores in Western Mass. And so, you know, we're just kids, not knowing what we're doing. And we are like, everybody bakes the bread, everybody delivers the bread. Oh, let's go to Boston. You know? Let's go talk to this person. So he luckily was wonderful to us. So we say to him at 22, oh, you're this big, huge company, and we're this tiny little bakery. And if you take 30 days to pay your bills, we're going to go out of business. We can't do that. And he goes, oh, it's OK. We'll pay you cash, which is unheard of in the supermarket industry. And this man mentored me, the buyer at Stop and Shop mentored me and taught me. He actually, the first time he took me into his office, he's like, how old are you? I said, I'm 22. He goes, I have a daughter the same age as you. Let me just tell you how you call in a supermarket. So he said, first of all, go buy a suit. You know, I just like didn't even know the basics of that. So I said, go buy a suit. And then he taught me what a planogram was. He taught me like how supermarkets make decisions. And so because I was clueless. And so I went away and I did all the things he told me to do, bought my first suit. And I show up in Boston, and he comes out into the waiting room. And he pretends like he's never met me before, knowing that he had told me everything I needed to do. And his name was Charlie Ringler, and he was the buyer for Stop and Shop for years and years and years. And he mentored me. And so if I look at like most of my success comes from having good mentors and being willing to ask for help, I think.
I have a follow-up to that question.
Sure.
If you could go back and you chose not to do the same thing again, what path would you have taken, knowing what you know now? Bread or not bread, just in general.
I think I probably would still be an entrepreneur of some sort. I didn't know it actually when I started there because I actually came and applied for a job at this little bakery. It's called Industry Farm Bakery in Guilford, and they had an ad for an assistant distribution manager. And I was 21, and there were 4 requirements for the job. Let me see if I can remember them. You had to know the difference between a debit and a credit, be able to run a 10-key adding machine, be able to drive a truck, and be good with people. Those were the 4 requirements for the job. So I figured I grew up in Vermont, I can drive anything, and I'm pretty good with people, and I'll figure out the rest of it. To this day, I don't know the difference between a debit and a credit. I can tell you, what's wrong with your financial statement, but I can't do the little T-charts that tell you how to fix it. So I actually applied for the job there. And what that big title meant was that I got to get into a van and sell to stores and open up new routes, and that's really what I did. And so by the time I was 25 or 26, I said, man, this is wicked cool. I helped to grow this company from less than 100,000 in sales to almost $1 million, and I like this. I'm going to go do this for myself. So that's, at 25, that's what I decided. So I went off and negotiated to buy a little bakery in Western Massachusetts, and I said, I like this. I'm going to do this. So I came back and I told the owners of this company, a man, his father, and his brother-in-law, I said, you guys have been so good to me. I have learned so much. I'm going to move away and do this for myself. And so I said, I'll give you as much notice as you need, a month, 3 months, 6 months, whatever it takes, but I'm going to go do this because I'm good at it. And within 24 hours, totally unexpected to me, I was not expecting this at all, they came back with a plan for me to buy out the brother-in-law. And so that's what I did. I stayed and bought out the brother-in-law, and then my long-term partner bought out the father, and then the 2 of us bought out the original guy in the early 90s. And then we were a majority women-owned business, but I had a male business partner. And so I would have to say that I was going to go figure it out how to do something entrepreneurial, because that really did feed me, and I really liked to do it. So, yes?
What do you think?
What's your name?
Oh, I'm sorry. Mary, and I'm a student.
Hi, Mary.
I'm curious what you would consider to be the essential characteristics of an entrepreneur.
Bullheaded. Interesting. I think there's something getting to what you were talking about being able to live with risk and uncertainty. That's a core piece that has to get worked out, because you're not getting a paycheck, right? Nobody's writing you a check from a big corporation, and so you got to create that for yourself. And I think that some it's a very creative thing. You know, it's kind of fun now that in the creative economy conversation that's going on, is they're starting to understand how creative business is. And I always thought, God, it's like one of the most creative things on the planet. What are you talking about that it's not creative? And I think there is a level of that sort of creativeness and energy and willingness to keep going. And I was only half joking about the bullheadedness. But I would say, yeah, those types of things, and to face risk, because you know my house was on the line and my credit card bills were maxed out, and until I sold the company. Yes.
My name's Kathleen. I'm a student here.
Hi, Kathleen.
Hi. What do you see different in the market right now for an entrepreneur versus when you started 20-some years ago?
Well, you know, we went through the difficult times of the 80-81, back when the interest rates. I think the interest rate on my first truck was 19%. So I would venture to guess that there's opportunity in any economy. It's just where do you look? What are you looking for? And how do you figure that out? I told you the story. This is Sue Strassenberg's sister, Meg, who walked in. So I told you the story about Sue, and we had to figure that out with her. Like, what do you do when the market has suddenly changed? And it's just pushing yourself to think a little bit differently and to try stupid things and just throw them out and bounce them off your advisory board, getting back to that again, and to try and figure out where there is opportunity. Because in this market or in that market of 80-81, you know, you would never say start a bakery when the interest rates are 19%. I mean, it's just crazy. Yes?
So Lisa, could you say anything about what Brattleboro and Windham County and Vermont are like to start and run a business in?
You know, I know people say Vermont's a difficult place to run a business. I personally have never experienced that. You know, some things are more difficult here in that our pool is smaller for insurance, for example, and so that was actually quite a burden for my business. We paid livable wages and had great benefits, and the cost of that increasing all the time, the workers' comp and the health insurance coverage was really difficult in Vermont because we are such a small state. I wanted to live here. I grew up here. You know, this is what you look at, not billboards. And you know, I've always found that you know, we've had good workers here. We've had, you know, I've had pretty good experience here. The town and our state government is very approachable. And I think that that's an important thing, that, you know, when you have a problem, you can call people up and they're in the phone book, even the governor's in the phone book. And I think there's something about the livability of that scale that's really important. And Vermont is this part of Vermont is very nicely located for a food business. There's a reason that C&S Wholesale Grocer is located here, which is that we're in a great spot in terms of getting to our customers in the most efficient way. And you know, I went through the Act 250 process. You know, I just don't. I think if you do it well and you understand, you have good people around you that can shepherd you through it. I find that the state has always, and the town has always been incredibly welcoming to me. I mean, we have at this plant now, I think we have about 200 livable wage jobs, and so, you know, that's an important thing for the town. One of the things that we could talk, I don't know if you have interest in talking about this, but when I brought my equity partner in Charterhouse Group, I turned 40. I didn't actually decide at 44 and the next day sell my equity in my company. It took about 4 years. And I went away and I tried to think about the values that were most important to me. What was really critical to me as I was exiting my CEO role and the majority stake in my business, what was most important to me? And I went to Virgin Gorda, which I consider Vermont in the Caribbean, and I made a list, and it was literally 20 pages long. And I started with that list about all the values that were so critical to me. And I got them down to 4. Because I knew that, you know, if I was going to try and find the right partner to come in here, I had to get really clear about what was key. And so I came up with 4. The first was that the jobs need to stay in southern Vermont. It's very important to have those manufacturing jobs here in this town, in this location. And then the second was that the new equity owners had a commitment to organic agriculture, that all the new products were going to be organic. The third was that they be committed to having employee stock ownership because, as you can tell, with negative numbers in my checkbook and being maxed out on my credit cards, it wasn't a good thing to own stock in my company until they came in. So they need to be committed to that. And then the fourth was that they don't do the Wimpy strategy. You know, the Popeye, the character in Popeye? I'd gladly pay you on Tuesday for a hamburger today. So many of these deals that you see out there are exactly what I call Wimpy deals. So they need to be solid and have the cash to make this thing happen. You know, what happened for me is that my company, my customers consolidated. And that's what's been happening over the last 10 or 12 years in the food business. There are basically 2 supermarket chains and 1 natural product chain and Trader Joe's now. When I got started, there were, in the Boston market, for example, there was, Star Market, little chains of stores, and there was Erewhon, Bread and Circus. There's lots of different places that you could sell. And over time, they just kept merging. And the same thing happened to my suppliers. And so when I used to buy I buy most of the wheat grown in the Champlain Valley. When they all started getting bought too, so that Conagra owns them all now. And Conagra actually makes the flour now for King Arthur flour. So both my customers and my suppliers got bigger. And in a natural bread business, there was a number of us that were regional. So we can service about 8 hours away from our plant to supermarkets, but we were all regional. And none of us had the money to make us be one company, even though that's what we needed to do. And so for the last couple of years that I owned the Vermont Bread Company, because of these issues about health insurance and workers' comp, they were rising so quickly that I wasn't able to give raises to my staff. And it was untenable that's what was happening. But given the commodity prices and the cost of insurance, we were still paying for their health insurance, but we could not then pay raises. And so I knew we had to do something. We had to get big enough so that there was enough scale so that our employees could get raises. And we could buy insurance as a bigger group, and we could buy supplies as a bigger group. And so we needed to be a national company. And so that's what happened is I found Charterhouse Group in New York. They're the oldest private equity firm in the country. They're more patient capital. And so they came in and bought a majority of Vermont Bread Company in 2005. And I got hired to go and buy all my friends, which was fun. So now we're one national company. Yes, it helps to make the other stuff less.
So you talked about that as the big guy. What about when you were the little guy? Did you have the same experience? Other established companies being helpful to you?
Oh yeah. The Nissen people, I don't know if you remember Nissen Baking Company, they were awesome. They would always help you out. Always. They were just so tickled to help in anything. If a machine broke down, they'd send me a machine, or they would send me flour if I'd run out of flour. I mean, it's the same thing in the other direction. And I always felt incredibly mentored by especially the old-time family-run businesses. So the Bouillet Facets and the Nissen before they all got bought. Were really helpful. I have really great friendships there. One of the Freihoppers actually was on my advisory board. We never really made that out loud too much, but he was the son of the founder, and he just always loved what we were doing, and so he sat on my board. So yeah.
My name's Kevin. I'm a student here.
Hi, Kevin.
Hi. What kind of culture did you have at Vermont Bread Company, and how did you foster that?
Yeah, that was like one of the most important things. It was great. I got my, I had my biggest compliment ever is a woman came to work there, and on her second day, I came down to the break room, and she said, "I just have to tell you something." I said, "Whoa, what?" She said, "I have never worked in a place that was as welcoming as this place has been." Trying to foster and what we called it was respect. And so we always treated each other with respect. And having that, always constantly trying to get that throughout the whole company. We had crazy rules like, if you ever get mad and want to yell, you have to go outside and run around the bakery once. If you come back and you still want to yell, you got to go run around again. And so nobody ever actually made it around twice, I don't think. But those kind of things, like keep it lighthearted, but also really reinforce all the time. We weren't allowed to swear. There's no swearing. And yet, you think about who, we say that we hire the bottom third of the school system. And so a lot of the educational stuff that we do there was really important, but also that there was a real culture of, there's some rough and tumble people that work with me, but outside of work they can be that way, but inside of work they can't. I was actually in a car full of my teammates. I played softball for years here in Brattleboro, and this big guy with long hair, and he just looked mean, walked across the walkway in front of the car. And he turns around and goes, "Hey, Lisa." I'm like, "Hey, how you doing?" And they all looked at me like, "Who is that?" But he worked at the bakery, and there's just there's ways that you can, we always, all of us knew each other's names. We always treated each other with respect. Never swore, never. We used to have funky, and it's funny, and it's so hokey that it works. Like, we used to have signs up that said, if you're having a bad day, fake it. Or if you're not having a bad day, fake it. And so, to really try and say, and we made it lighthearted, and everybody used to quote things back to me about that we used to say to each other. Like, and it's also the culture of how do you make things happen at your company. Like, we had a saying, everybody would say it, the bread will go out. I mean, there is nothing. There's nobody's doesn't do a job because the bread will go out. And so if something's going on in the bakery, everybody, including me, I'd jump on, a machine to make it happen. And we still hear it everywhere. It's like, the bread will go out. It will go out. And so, those kind of things, like how do you get those? We call them. I actually talk about this in the book. There's a section I talk about the mantras that you sort of put throughout your culture, and how do you do that? And I always thought that hokey was kind of funny because people would kind of laugh and then do it. So. Yes, Jonathan.
How many employees did you have at the highest at one point?
Well, right now in the company, there's just under 500. When I sold to Charter House, I think I had, and that doesn't include the subcontract. All of our distributors are subcontracted. So I think there was 90 or 95 here. And then there was probably another 80 subcontracted. And then our shipping was done as we had a separate company, and that employed about 15. So, a lot.
So I don't want to be too abrupt here, but maybe we can just take one more question.
Okay.
Lisa, my name is Will. I'm on the faculty here.
Hi, Will.
You've mentioned several times food co-op.
Yeah.
Food co-op.
Yep.